Hello, sorry. So I won't have any slides today. I'm just going to talk at a very high level, specifically around what ENS is doing and sort of where I see ENS going as it relates to building community and building community, whether it's with like brands or you're sort of, like you have like bigger companies that are potentially using ENS. And to give you a couple examples, one of the things I do as far as being also a builder in this space is I work for Vayner NFT, which is part of the Vayner Media, Gary Vee company. And we work with a lot of bigger companies. So you have like AB InBev, if you don't know who that is, that's like, say, like Budweiser. They have all the, Michelob, all these companies under there. We also have Pepsi. And I don't know if you saw, but for instance, Pepsi, actually it was Budweiser, they bought beer.eth. Did anyone see when they bought beer.eth? So when they bought that, we were sort of help coordinate that. So they bought beer.eth, but I think the really cool thing that they did was they issued and created a subdomain off of beer.eth for that brand, right? So I think if you look at what subdomains are going to enable, they're really going to sort of, the base domain gives you this sort of like container for everything that you want to do under that. You can have community, you can build products, you can market in a lot of different ways. And because ENS is really tied into the Ethereum network, you have this opportunity to really use it as an identity as well. So that's essentially what I really want to focus on today. So the one thing that you couldn't do, you still can't technically do it today unless you have a very strong dev team, is the subdomains are not actually tradable NFTs. I would say about a year ago, ENS started work, and so just to clarify, I'm not a member of the ENS team. I've just sort of been talking with them, building a project using this technology, and it's specifically around the name wrapper. So there's something called the name wrapper contract, and that once you basically inject ENS domain into the name wrapper, you can issue subdomains off of that name wrapper, which are also NFTs now, all within the same collection. So what does that enable you to do? Well, today, if I created a subdomain, I couldn't actually sell it or have it be its own sort of like NFT in a marketplace and also have it tied directly to the base domain that it came off of. So I think if we took the beer.eth example, I think it was, they did like Budweiser.beer.eth. Budweiser.beer.eth was not a separate like NFT. It was connected to beer.eth, but not like movable. So this name wrapper contract is what's going to enable these subdomains to essentially be completely like separate and have their own marketplace tied to them. So I think that innovation is going to completely change the way that a lot of these NFT communities develop, market, and engage. So if you would take the concept of, say, like what Bored Apes did, if they had also purchased boredapeyachtklub.eth and issued, say, like the token ID for the subdomain, you could, and then also had the imagery and the metadata within that subdomain, that's what you're going to be able to see. So moving forward, I think you're going to see a lot of projects that make use of this name wrapper function because you no longer need to have the subdomain separate and then the NFT separate. You can have the NFT and the subdomain wrapped up together. So you would see, say, the image, you would have the metadata there, and then you would have all that information available. You could also use that ENS to log in, to set up your reverse lookup. So these are just things that I think that will be the next iteration. A lot of people are looking for like, what's the next wave? What's the narrative? I think using subdomains as a way of containing and like galvanizing community, you actually feel like you own part of it, right? You own part of that narrative with this subdomain being created. And that's a lot of what we do with brands as well within Vayner. We work with them to say, hey, like, first thing they ask, why would I want to pay 30 ETH for this name? Like, they don't understand, like, what's the value add? But when you look at it for the capabilities it enabled, sure, you can put it on your Twitter and it's a great handle, but it's not really anything that's so, magical that they feel like they need to do it. But the narrative now is you can use this to also receive, you can use this to map information. And the other thing that you get with the name wrapper is these subdomains can also have subdomains. as crazy as it sounds. So when you have a subdomain of a subdomain, you could really kind of get really crazy with it. You have subgroups, communities within communities. To use a very simple example, if you look at Bored Ape Yacht Club, there's like a people who are really popular with like the orange background. Well, what if the creators wanted to say, oh, we're going to have the orange background club within the Bored Ape, and then you could create a whole set of identities off of that. So where we're really going with digital identity, I think, is really just contained within sort of this sort of like identifier that's tied to us. And I think the use of these subdomains, whether they're technically known as subdomains or handles or what have you, is really what's going to change the dynamic for how we sort of take ENS to the next level. The other thing I wanted to add was that as far as you're thinking like, well, does this scale? It actually does scale. There is no limit to how many subdomains you can create off of a base domain. I'm working on a project right now that's called .earth, and we're basically creating we're going to enable people to create a lot of different subdomains off of earth.eth, right? So the whole concept, once again, is you have this container, right? We're all on Earth, and then anyone can come and mint this sort of like subdomain, and then that becomes your identity, not just within the .earth ecosystem, but also within the ENS ecosystem, and then you can use that to plug in to really any sort of like Ethereum-based web application. There's a whole sign-in with Ethereum. If you've seen like Lens Protocol, so everything tied to ENS, they're really building this like foundational infrastructure that I think is going to really expand where we take things moving forward. Yep, so that's all I wanted to make everyone aware of as it relates to ENS and how I think there's just going to be a big marriage between ENS and NFTs. And NFTs, when I say NFTs in this area, I mean like avatars and PFPs. So you'll no longer need to carry two structures. You'll actually have just one structure. And that model, I would expect, whenever we get some more momentum within the market, I expect that model moving forward will be very popular. And I wouldn't be surprised if every single NFT collection that came out, as well as avatars, will actually be an ENS subdomain that underpins it. Thank you.